Hi there and welcome to another episode of Security Skills. I'm Carl Randall and I'm back with security expert Anthony Milner. And we have a bit of a thinker for you here. It's the rational versus emotional brain. And this is all to do with how people react to threats. And it's very useful for security professionals to know, as it will help you decide the best course of action when dealing with individuals. Let's get into it. So, Anthony, the rational and emotional brain. What are these?
Probably the easiest way to think about it is if you're calm and relaxed when you're reading something or you're watching something, it's your rational brain working at that time, it's calculating, and essentially it's your kind of relaxed state is your, most people anyways, rational side. So you're able to think before you act. So that's your rational side. When you get stress added, that's where the emotional state can take over and your decision making can be hindered. You can become very reactive. It is our survival part of our brain. So essentially it's how we survive as a species. Hear a loud noise in the night, you're going to react to that. Your heart rate's going to go up. You're going to be ready to potentially fight or flight, so run or fight. But your decision making may also be hindered in this. Making clear, decisive decisions is potentially going to be dropped.
Why is it important for security professionals to know which is which?
Well, it's very important for us to understand if somebody's in an emotional state, it could be very dangerous for us dealing with them. We need to think about how close we're standing, are we within arm's reach, because they can react very violently very quickly. Some people have a more progressive sort of state towards violence. Maybe they never reach violence, but others could go straight from frustration to violence with one step. And we don't know these people we're dealing with. These are the general public. We've never met most of them before, so we don't know what kind of mindset that they're in.
So you mentioned there that people react differently in both states really. But what kind of triggers are there for someone that could really escalate in an emotional state?
Getting somebody into an emotional state, it can be a trigger that we have nothing to do with. In other words, we arrive and they're already in that state. But I've seen it before where people have just not known how to deal with somebody and they've gone from someone who's quite calm and they've just triggered them all the way up to aggressive state of mind. Things like embarrassing people, talking down to people, not taking them seriously when they're giving you, a problem that they're experiencing and sort of talking it down, ignoring somebody who's trying to make contact with you. All of these things are going to lead to that first step, which is frustration, which then can escalate very quickly into potential anger and violence.
So we talked then about how you can trigger somebody into an emotional state, but how can we switch them back to a rational state?
It's a lot easier said than done. Once somebody's got to a certain point, it may be that we just need to distance ourselves and let them blow the wind out of their own sails. So sometimes letting somebody get it off their chest, and if they're shouting and carrying on, let them carry on, because a lot of the time that's actually what they're like, a pressure cooker, and they're just releasing, so we can let them actually do that. Not talking over them, letting them have their say so they can get their point across, nodding your head. There's a couple of little cues you can use, again, if it's safe to do so, which may be hard to determine, but trying to position yourself in a way where you kind of almost face the same direction as them, still have them in sight. The idea being we're both looking at this challenge together. It's a small little cue that you do that people's brains pick up on subconsciously. And again, trying to reason with them and yourself. The most important thing is to keep calm, keep your own body language open, showing that you don't want to fight, and giving those sort of emotional cues and those visual cues to the person to try and bring them back down again.
I mentioned there that it's easier said than done. Obviously, on a night out, you're working on the doors, people have had drugs, alcohol. How does this change someone's thinking?
Well, drugs and alcohol basically fuel the emotional side of the brain. It's very easy if you go out into high street somewhere where there's clubs operating and you go at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and you look at how people are behaving, and then you add 12 hours and you go at 1 o'clock in the morning and you see how people are behaving. They're very different people. That's fueled mainly by alcohol and of course drugs as well. And it does change personalities. It does make people a lot more emotionally driven, so they're much more reactive. And we have to be very aware of that when we're dealing with people. You sometimes have to over-explain things to people because they're not picking up on it, which can be a bit frustrating, but you again, as customer services, you've got to try and maintain your composure and calmness, re-explaining things to people who maybe aren't getting it the first time.
So that's customers. We want customers to be thinking more rationally. But in terms of security professionals, what mindset should they be in?
Obviously, in a perfect world, we're rational 100% of the time. We never get emotional, and we never let our emotions get on top of us. Unfortunately, in the real world, day to day, we're all human, and we all have good days, we have bad days, and we have, times of the day somebody might have talked down to you as a security professional, and this might have gotten to you a little bit, etc. It's always important to know yourself as well, and to know where someone has maybe gotten your head a little bit and triggered you. And if that does happen, the most important thing is really just take 5 minutes with yourself. Get away from the front line if you can, if possible, obviously, if we've got the staff for it, especially if it's starting to trigger you a little bit. Because what could happen is then the next person that comes along who maybe says something triggers you into a much more serious situation where you could lose your license as a result of your actions because you've reacted angrily and you've lashed out at somebody, something like that. Somebody else has filmed you. It's a bad ending to you because it could very easily end with your license being revoked.
Yeah, so again, I think this is easier said than done, but the most important thing here is to reflect on what has actually triggered you.
Absolutely, and I think that can be done individually, but it can also be done by a good team. Again, knowing your colleagues that you're working with, and if you spot a visual cue that your colleague, as in these people well, that your colleague's being triggered, it's time maybe for you to act and take over the conversation. Just get your colleague to go and have a break or something like that, again, if you've got the staff to do that. But essentially, you're protecting your colleague in that state because you know where it's going to go, so you're trying to step in and stop that from happening.
Yeah, work together as a team.
Absolutely.
Okay, Anthony, thank you very much. That was actually really, really interesting. So in terms of the rational and emotional thinking, if you want to learn more about this, it will be covered on your course under the conflict management section. But that's all from us today. We'll see you on the next one.